first time you were contacted, whether it was illegal or not, by the Oilers about coming here after you won your last Grey Cup for the Edmonton Eskimos?
I think it was prior to the season of 1983, and it was illegal because I was under contract, but I don't really care now. Who cares if I get in trouble for that?
Warren signed the largest contract in the history of pro football, 5 years, for $5.5 million. That was a lot of money back then.
That was a lot of money back
What do you
then.
think about a poor kid from LA making that kind of money?
No, that was a lot of money in 1984. Like you said, it was the highest paid deal in the league at that time. I think John Elway was right below that when I came in, and that was one of the reasons why I was able to come to Houston. They presented me with the best financial package. My former Canadian League coach was the head coach at Houston at that time, and I wanted to come to an organization where I could help a team build, where I could have went to Seattle, which is where I was living at the time. They wanted me to sign there. They had a really good organization. Chuck Knox was their coach, and he was somebody that I really admired because he coached the Rams when I was a young kid growing up. So there was a lot of temptation to sign with Seattle, but because of the package that they presented me here in Houston, I couldn't turn it down. And I never second guessed it for a minute. Even though we had some really lean days in the beginning trying to turn things around and grow our program, I loved living in Houston. It was a great city for me and my family.
When is the first time you were contacted, whether it was illegal or not, by the Oilers about coming here after you won your last Grey Cup for the Edmonton Eskimos?
I think it was prior to the season of 1983, and it was illegal because I was under contract, but I don't really care now. Who cares if I get in trouble for that? But yeah, they flew me into town. It was very hush-hush. They took me to a couple of different restaurants that nobody was in those restaurants but me and a couple other people that were involved in the visit. They took me to the facility at night, in the evening, when everybody was gone, and turned all the lights on, let me see what the facility looked like and everything. And they told me that they wanted to sign me, and if there was a way I could get out of my contract, they wanted to make the deal happen. So I wasn't able to get out my contract that year, but I was able to get out the next year, and that's why I ended up coming here that next year. But yeah, that was that's something I don't talk about to a lot of people. Right? But you brought it up, so what can I do now?
I didn't know that story. I thought you came later. What was that like back then when you guys were winning and playing in the House of Pain and setting offensive records?
It was a lot of fun. There's no question about it. I remember watching the Oilers on television when Dan was a quarterback, and I knew what the atmosphere could be like if we ever turned this thing around, because I saw what it was like when Dan was quarterbacking and Earl was running the football, and with all the pom-poms and the Houston Oilers song, and we finally got things turned around in '87, and we turned into that same type of atmosphere, and those were some fun days. And our offense evolved. I started out, like you said, with a very, very conservative offense where we were just running the football and not really using me very much as far as the things that I did best, but we eventually evolved into a team that threw the football a lot, and that was something that I enjoyed doing because that was my strength, but it also put a lot of pressure on you because you had to be on every week, especially in that run and shoot offense. There wasn't a lot of running. We didn't have a tight end on our roster, so it was all 4 wideouts. Everything was spread out, and I had to be on every week, or we weren't going to have very much success on offense.
Even though Warren lives in California, he's a big fan of our teams there. He loves the Rockets, loved the Rockets when he was here, Astros fan, and he loved the Oilers, and of course now he likes the Texans. And when the day after Deshaun Watson was drafted, I called Warren and I did a column because I knew he met him, and I said, "Tell me about Deshaun Watson." Everything he told me has come true, and I've always Warren is the second Houston quarterback in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. George Blanda was the first, Warren second. Watson's our third year of his career, but the kid's a great kid too. And I know you follow Watson. What did you see in him? Tell people what you told me. What do you think about the way he's playing right now?
Well, I met him when I presented him the College Quarterback of the Year award at the ESPN College Football Awards in Atlanta. But I knew about his story, and I had followed him for the previous 2 years before he came out of school when they went to the championship game, and then the next year they ended up winning the championship game. And I knew about his relationship with his mom and how close that was, and that's where the similarity came in, because my mom and I were very, very close, and we were both raised by single moms, and just seeing how he played in the biggest moments in big games, you just knew that he was going to be a guy that once he came into this league, it wasn't going to change, because he was the same way in high school, he was that way in college, and since he's been in the league for his short 3 years, they've won 2 division titles when he's been healthy. And I think if they build a better football team around him, which they're starting to do, you're starting to see the results of that. So just a tremendous young man. He's a very, very good person, first of all, and then a tremendous athlete. So Houston's lucky to have a guy like him at the helm right now.
2 weeks ago, he threw for 5 touchdowns, beat Atlanta, threw for 426 yards. And I had people, as one talk show host, say, man, that's the best performance a Houston quarterback's ever had. You have never seen anything better, have you? And I said, well, let me tell you about Kansas City in a cold, biting rain in 90 or 91?
90, I think. Yeah, 90.
1990, the Oilers were playing Arrowhead Stadium in December. It was cold, and it was raining, and it was windy. And the greatest performance I've ever seen was put on by him, who tied Norm Van Brocklin's all-time record. Was it 527 yards he threw for?
Yeah, I think it was 11 yards below Van Brocklin, because I could have broke the record if I'd have stayed in the game, but I didn't want to stay in the game and just keep throwing the football to throw it, because we had the game pretty much wrapped up. I had kind of hurt my thumb in the game, and there was no reason for me to keep throwing the football. And I thought maybe we'd have to play these guys in the playoffs, so you don't want to do anything to give them any bulletin board material, you know. So I came out of the game early, but I remember when I got back home the next day, the African American newspaper here, one of the writers called me an Uncle Tom, because I didn't break the record, because he felt it was an important achievement for an African American to do, and I should have done it, and I was a sellout by not doing it. And that really rubbed me the wrong way, because I felt like we had a big win on the road. I had a great performance to go along with the rest of our team. And then to have somebody of my own race, you know, call me an Uncle Tom because I'm doing the sportsman-like thing to do and worrying about my health, that I was criticized for that. So I didn't take that too kindly.
It's not a big deal now, but when Warren came up, there's still a lot of people didn't think a black quarterback could be successful in the NFL. He put up with a lot of racism when he first got here. In 84 and 85, 86, the Oilers were terrible, even though they had Mike Munchak, Bruce Matthews, 2 Hall of Fame offensive linemen, and they were stockpiling a great offensive team, and as Warren mentioned, it took off in 87. But I wanted, and Dan, what he went through when the Oilers were losing from the fans here, I'm amazed that you two can have such affection for the fans here, considering the way you were both abused early in your career. And tell people what it was like for you when you first came here and what you put up with, like moving your family from the stands into a box so they didn't have to hear the fans.
Yeah, it was tough, but I knew that coming in that it could be tough if we weren't successful right away. Because when I went to the University of Washington from Los Angeles, I was the first African American quarterback to play there as well, and we weren't very good either. They were coming off of a 2-9 team. I was part of the first class of Don James, who was my head coach at that time. He felt like I had the ability to play major college football where I wasn't getting a lot of offers from a lot of other schools. So I went up there to play, and you're a couple of thousand miles away from home. It's raining up there every day. One period I went through was 28 days that it rained straight, up in Seattle. And I'm walking around wondering, what the hell am I doing here? But we, like I said, got off to a slow start. I think we lost 4 of our first 5 games, and of course, most of the criticism comes either on the quarterback or the coach or both. and I got a lot of that criticism, a lot of booing, a lot of heckling from the crowd, a lot of racial slurs, being pointed at me. And my girlfriend, who became my wife at the time, would get into arguments with people in the stands because of some of the things that they were yelling, and buddies of mine the same way. And it wasn't a very good atmosphere. You're 18 years old, you're away from home. Every time you run on the field, all you hear is 60,000 people booing you, and you can tell the difference between moon and boo. You can definitely tell the difference. And the toughest thing for me was, as a quarterback, when you walk in that huddle, those 10 guys are going to look you in the eye, and they're going to see if you're the guy that has the confidence to lead them down the football field and do what it takes to score. And I had to be the best actor that I could ever be at that time when I walked into those huddles with all that booing going on, because I knew those guys were looking at me to see if any of this affected me, because it affected a lot of them. And they told me years later, nobody wanted to mention it then, but they would mention it, that they couldn't stand it. It made them sick, and they knew what I must have been feeling. But I was able to look those guys in the eyes and still continue to keep doing my job, the best I could. And we eventually turned things around, won the Pac-8 championship. I was Pac-8 Player of the Year, and we went on to the Rose Bowl, and I was MVP of the Rose Bowl. So things did get turned around, but I knew, taking that experience when I came here to Houston, it was going to be some tough days, because we're building a program, and I was going to take some criticism, and I was going to go through some adversity, and it definitely happened, and it was a little bit nastier than what I received in college, because you're just a little bit more exposed to it when you're in pro football. There's much more media, many more fans. You're down here in the South. They're not used to seeing an African American quarterback quarterback their football team, and I wasn't alone at this time. I was with a family. I now had I think I had three kids when I came here, and then another one was born after. But they had to endure that. And that's the toughest thing for me, was I had been through it before, so it didn't bother me as much, even though it did bother me. But for them, you have young kids that don't understand what's going on and why people are calling their dad these types of names. And that was the toughest part of me being a dad, was turning from the football player to try and talk to my son when I'm at my locker after a game about what he was hearing and how I had to deal with it. So yeah, there were some very, very tough days, but again, things got turned around, and we became a very, very good football team. I got very involved in the community with my foundation, and when you really look back at it, it was only a small percentage of people that were that way, and for the majority of people here in Houston, this is a really, really good town, but there's ignorance everywhere in this country, and that's something that we have to do a better job of turning around, not only in sports, but just in life in general. And you gotta kind of try to keep that in perspective as a player, that everybody's not that way. There's a lot of good people, and I was supported by a lot of people here as well. It wasn't all bad for me. There was a lot of good as well, and I just tried to feed off the good and try and not focus on the negative that was going on.